Hello, everyone. Thank you for sliding into our DMs. My name is Dan,
And I'm Montana.
and thank you for joining us for our fourth podcast and part two of our fourth podcast, which is combating stereotypes. So, in the previous episode, we talked more about some of the stereotypes that we had faced within our personal lives and how those have impacted us, as well as how it could impact many others within the community. And now we wanted to talk more on the grander scale of stereotypes that have been perpetuated throughout our society and how those could impact us in the negative ways. And through some of our conversations prior to this meeting or this podcast, one of the things that we really realized was especially just how much media can impact stereotypes, whether that is like movies or comedians using derogatory terms, or for us is the butt of the joke. There's a lot of harmful things that could be said that perpetuate a lot of stereotypes. And before we go into that, I do want to put a content warning out there that potentially derogatory language, for the sake of an example, would be said throughout this episode. So that is our content warning. If those terms do make you uncomfortable, we completely understand, but we think it highlights the greater point of what we're trying to make and how those terms could be harmful. So it's actually funny, Montana. I remember about a year ago, I made a little series on Disability Rewritten about disability stereotypes in media. And a lot of the two
Mhm.
biggest things that I always remember is this idea of there's always either the able-bodied savior, where it's like, oh, this poor disabled person, and it's either like a doctor or a parent goes to like lengths end to save this poor child or wife or whatever have you uh from this disability, and they do all this yada yada thing without the disabled person having any agency, and they're just kind of there to pity, which is an incredibly harmful way. Or it's that the disabled person who's the main character is played by an able-bodied person, and it kind of shows the idea of, oh, a disabled person is not able to actually act in that regard. So I I don't know. Have you ever thought of those types of stereotypes? And if so, like, what do you think of how they could harm this whole community on a greater scale?
Yeah, definitely the first stereotype I have seen. I would say probably on like a larger scale, and I feel like that is not a great representation. And like you were
Not
saying,
at
like
all.
yeah, the person did not have like agency regarding this. And one thing that we need to be like very self-aware of is talking to that individual and figuring out like what they want and also like what they need to if they even need anything, because I feel like that's another assumption or stereotype, that if you are in this disabled community that you need like additional support, or it's just like that assumption. I'm going to tell you when I need support. Dan
Yeah.
knows this. My
Yes,
friends know
exactly.
this. My family knows this. Like, don't come in as like my knight in shining armor and be a savior when I did not ask you to be. And like, I understand like what you think you're doing, but that's not okay. Like, one example that comes up for me is I've been seeing well, this was a while ago, but I don't know, 6 months, a year ago, I was on like YouTube or whatever, looking at like YouTube videos, or I think it was Instagram. Anyway, I saw someone post something, and it was someone trying to cross the street, and they had a vest on saying like I am blind. They did not have their guide dog with them, but they had their yeah, they didn't have their guide dog with them. Um, and a person literally took this person's arm when the light turned to the walking thing and basically walked this person to the other side and then just left. And I'm like, am I seeing this correctly?
Yeah.
Like, what?
It's
Like,
people just feel like they want that clout. Like, oh, I helped this poor disabled person who never asked for your help, never consented to it. And it's just so ridiculous. Like, imagine like we're two able-bodied people and you're just like making like a peanut butter and jelly. and I just like
Mhm.
walk in the middle and just make like grab the bread from you and just make the rest of it. Like I feel like that's just like what people think. Like they think we're doing a great help to us, but they're not.
Yeah, they're doing a great harm. And I
Yeah.
had to watch that video multiple times. I'm like, am I seeing this correctly? And towards like the end of the video, like the able-bodied person looks so happy, like you were saying, like the savior and like fixing. And then the disabled person looked like, what the actual heck just happened? Like, I want to hit you. They had like that expression on their face, which I'm like, okay, for sure. And there has been other content creators that have seen regarding a similar scenario. And it's like, what do you do when you see someone who is disabled that's about to cross the street? And it gives all these ridiculous like answers. Like, do you take their arm and rush them? Like, do you like push them forward? Like, it's all these ridiculous things. Like one thing was like a bouncing, like one of those bouncy balls, like in public school that you use, and like this
Yeah.
guy was like on the bouncy. I'm like, this is so bad. And then towards the end of it, it's like, this is how you do it. You ask them, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like
No, like
it's so simple.
the amount of people that I know that like like disabled people that I know that have been asked for like or that people will just start doing like a menial task that anyone like no one was asking for help. No one was it's just ridiculous just how people
Mhm.
think that we're so incapable. And also that like people will just like grab someone's like wheelchair without their consent and start pushing them. There's so much. I think like that idea of like the savior complex, it really
Mhm.
makes disabled people it makes able-bodied people think that disabled people are just incapable of doing even the most menial task. And it's so harmful because
Mhm.
then you're not believing anything that they're saying. You're not getting consent. You're not listening. You're just doing whatever you think is right for that disabled person without actually respecting the person that is there. Um, and
Mhm.
that is really shown like it's perpetuated within our media, like you said, like there's those different types of stories. And then also different like news stories as well that'll highlight like, oh, look at this disabled person who has a job, or that, oh,
Oh
this
my goodness.
the really cute girl asked the disabled guy to prom. Good job for the girl.
Oh God, yes. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Yes. Yes. I feel like whenever they provide these stories, especially like the one that I just mentioned about like, oh, like the content creator of giving all these scenarios and then like the last one being correct. I feel like people have very short attention spans. So there needs to be a disclaimer saying like, disclaimer, please ask the person. Like,
Yeah.
please get like consent that this is what they want and like they're okay with this. Because I feel like if someone watches that and does not watch like the full length of the video, then I don't know. I wouldn't do it personally. But I don't know what else is in someone's brain. But I feel like they get that idea and then they think, oh, I can do that as well. And have that savior complex, like you were saying. And then it's a whole spiral effect that we're supposed to be moving forward as a society and helping others. And yeah, so I'm gonna pass it on to you before I get on a tangent. I feel
Yeah.
like this has
No.
to outcome.
No, you're so spot on. It's just so frustrating. And it it's tough because there are incredible, absolutely incredible things that disabled people are doing that should be highlighted. Uh, and instead of highlighting some of the wonderful like advocacy or charity work or anything like that, it's like, oh, disabled person works at on a garbage truck. Like that's all we're reduced to. Or that idea of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we should celebrate this able-bodied girl that is like taking pity on the disabled person, or the football team that's letting the disabled person be a part of it. Like, no, like we're more than that, and it's important to uplift and celebrate the wonderful people within our community in a way that isn't highlighting the savior complex of able-bodied people. And there's definitely ways to highlight the different stories that I mentioned through the disabled perspective only, and I think that's a wonderful way to do it. But most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it's always how the able-bodied people feel about this person, or how they gave them this chance, or anything like that. And I think reducing us to that is also really harmful, because there are great stories that are told and through movies or shows or anything like that, but they never do any casting of disabled people. Like there's
Yes, I was
great,
about to ask
yeah,
you about that. Yeah,
yeah,
I was about to
there's
ask you about
some
that.
great stories that have been made into movies, that the movies are good if you look at them in a vacuum, but it's hard to appreciate them for what they are, because it's an
Mhm.
able-bodied actor or actress portraying the role. Like I don't know if you ever seen Brain on Fire or 5 Feet Apart. I think those are pretty great stories, but every person who's playing a disabled role is not disabled.
Yeah, I have not seen the first one. I did see the second one a very long time ago, like when it first came out. Um, but yeah, I completely hear you. I feel like there should definitely be more representation. Um, why do you think there's not?
I think it's two reasons. It's that idea of Hollywood, or filmmaking in general, doesn't believe that disabled people can act. And it almost kind of works in that gaslighting effect, where a lot of disabled people that want to go into filmmaking don't think that they're going to get casted, and don't have the confidence to go up and try out and do all these auditions. So they
Hmm.
end up in different roles within the productions, and it's tough. Like there's a lot of amazing performers that, like, one person I can think of immediately is like Lauren Ridloff. She was a deaf consultant for so long, and it wasn't until she was in a performance where she was training a person who was able to listen how to do sign language, they left the production and they had no one else. So the director was like, hey, could you act? And they just threw her on, and she was on The Walking Dead. She was in Marvel movie the Eternals. Like she's crushing the roles that she's in. But she would never gotten that chance if an able-bodied actress just quit a production.
That is so frustrating. Like, oh my goodness. Uh, yeah. I I'm just like lost for words like regarding this because sometimes I feel like we are making positive steps forward, but then some conversations that we have, I'm just like, okay, wait, y'all, we can do a lot better than what we have right now. Like there's so much more that we can do, especially with representation and not putting these people in like a box of like you were saying, like stereotyping them of, oh, because you're disabled, you may or may not can act. Like it shouldn't matter if someone's passion is to do that. If you're able bodied, not able bodied, you should have the same chance to be successful in that career and position that you want to be in. There should not be these barriers and challenges that you have to think about and reconstruct your life on. One thing that comes up for me, like thinking of this, is like cost, because I feel like being disabled, it costs a little bit more because of being, you know, in urgent cares, ERs, doctor's offices more. It's dependent on your insurance. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just, I think that it's that idea of like there's so many different ways for us to be able to be given those different opportunities. But
Mhm.
because our society's an able-bodied society, they stereotype us into these boxes, like we talked about before, where they don't give us these chances, whether it is a big acting role or portraying us in a way that we deserve, through social media or anything like that. And unfortunately, that can kind of devolve into that idea of like mockery of us, and whether that's through derogatory language or tasteless jokes. There's just so many different ways that that we could be unfortunately characterized.
Yeah, 100%. I think it goes back to like what we've talked about in like our previous podcast, like already to like the beginning, is if people are just a little bit more self-aware and kind towards one another, then I believe like mountains would be moved, or like molehills in this case will be moved towards like a positive direction. But it seems like a lot of people want to stay consistent with where they're at and not wanting to grow and acknowledge that, hey, that comment I made was possibly inappropriate to someone else. Like, I apologize. I'm learning from this. I feel like a lot of people that I've seen who've had like a slip up, it's not the, oh, I'm so sorry for offending you. Like, I will do better. I will try my best. I feel like it's fighting. They are in the fight or flight mode, and they're fighting and being like, "Oh, I'm sorry you didn't like my joke," and they're trying to save face. And I feel like sometimes it's better to just acknowledge that you're human, that you made a mistake, that it was inappropriate to use that term or that joke, and that you're going to learn from it and grow so you are not the same person. However, a lot of people don't have that self awareness
Nope.
or want to have that self awareness with moving forward. Because I feel like if I said something that hurt you or someone I care about, or even a stranger, um, I would want to know so I can be better. So I don't put people in boxes, and so I don't like hurt anyone or trigger anyone because you don't know what someone's going through. But I have seen people, like you've stated in like the first part, just fighting it, and then sometimes we're just done like fighting them because we're like, okay, this is going to take so much energy. Like I can't.
Yeah. And it's tough because there is so much opportunity. Like we both believe in second chances and the ability to grow and adapt. And there's so many
Mhm,
people that will say things, and you can point it out because I do. There's certain words that like you can't give the benefit of the doubt of. Like for example, I think everyone knows that like the term retard is an
I
incredibly
hate that
offensive
word.
term.
Oh.
Yeah, it's such an incredibly offensive term for people, and saying it honestly has no excuse. But
Mhm,
there, you think if someone were to say it, like an able-bodied person, you you want to be able to help educate them and really know the harm that that word has, and maybe understand why it's considered at the level of other derogatory terms for other marginalized
mhm,
communities. And hopefully that person can grow, but most of the time they want to double down. And it's unfortunate
mhm,
because there are people that, like, I was having a conversation with a disabled person the other day actually, and it was right after I watched this movie. It's called Blazing Saddles, which it has a lot of offensive terminology, but it's kind of for the greater point of, in a capitalistic society, it is used to divide everyone, like different like racial or disability or anything is used so that way the people on top aren't taken advantage of, or that aren't overthrown by the rest of the common folk. And there's this character who's a disabled person, and his name throughout the entire movie is Mongo, which the long form word of that word is mongoloid, which at back in the day was a very offensive term to use for disabled people. But I was talking to another person in the disability community, and I was mentioning like the fact that I remembered hearing that in the past, and they thought it was a term for Mongolians in the past. So there can definitely be things that are lost in translation, and it's important to
mhm.
give the benefit of the doubt in those types of situations. But it's it's tough when people don't want to learn and they want to continue doubling down and saying that what I'm saying is not offensive because they
Mhm.
don't want to be wrong. And I think that's an unfortunate aspect of our society is that people don't want to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of this hasn't been too long ago. It was like maybe a month or so ago. I had a friend of mine that they used the R word, like not like towards me or anything, but we were doing our own thing, and I was like in one room and they were like in another room like playing like video games or something, and I heard that word like slip up, and I heard like their friend like say it, and I went immediately into the room and I was like, well, I don't want to disturb, but did I hear like what I thought I heard? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, do you guys use this a lot? And they're like, yeah, all the time. I'm like, okay, let's have a discussion. Like, this is not appropriate. Like, it makes me very uncomfortable. And I just like laid it out of like how uncomfortable it made me feel. And these are like the reasons why it made me uncomfortable, like with like being back in like as a child, as well as what the term was used for back in the day. And like, I would really prefer them using not that term like ever again. Like, I understand that we're human and we like make mistakes, but I would prefer never hearing that word like if I'm like around them. I also prefer them like taking out their vocabulary. And so we were talking about that and overall like, okay, what are like the next steps like moving forward? And I've actually like saw them this week and they did not use that word at all, and they were talking about like how like their friends aren't using the word like at all either when they're playing games. They're just using like regular cuss words. I'm like, okay. And at first I'm just like, that's kind of weird. Like, why are you telling me this? But then at the same time, I'm like, oh, okay. I was able to like educate someone and like tell them like my experience and like not harp on them, just being like, hey, this is uncomfortable. Can we talk about this? Because I don't think you're understanding how much weight and value that word is. I know for you and your friend, you guys think it's so like fun and cool using that word because you guys are able bodied. However, with someone who's not able bodied or who had that term used before or just anything, like it it makes me cringe and I'm uncomfortable. And I really want this to stop and have an open discussion about like why you use that word and how we can like move forward in this friendship, because that was like one thing that was like, okay, that's the only red flag I've ever seen from like this person. But I was glad that they took it like with a lot of grace and kindness, and they apologized, and then they told their friend regard like their friends regarding it, and we still had that open communication about like what's going on. And I'm like, okay, like this is good, this is positive movement forward. And I hope that like later on, if I do hear that like with a stranger or something, I don't know if I'll be confident enough, but like be willing to do kind of like what I did with like my friend, to just make people understand like this is where the term came from, this is how I feel about it, like why do you use it, like what's the point of it. I feel like a lot of the time people like their why regarding it is because other people, like my friend, their why was because their friend was using it during them playing video games. I'm like, huh? I'm like, no, 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 let's recap.
Yeah, no, and I think it's one of those things where it's so unfortunate, especially within our community, where our derogatory terms, we have to, I would say more than most communities, we have to fight and justify why our
Mhm.
terms are actually offensive
Harmful,
compared
yeah.
to other terms where like okay, so there was an example a couple weeks ago. There's a couple sports shows that I watch, and there's this one that I watched, and they were talking about some player going to another team and like their usage, and the guy talking like on national TV, mind you, just like casually drops is like, is this guy R word? And the other host is like,
Nuh-uh.
that's not the term I would use, but sure. Uh and like they just moved forward like with no addressing of it until like after that segment the guy like kind of like half-heartedly tried to apologize where he was like, I meant no offense, like the I had like a cousin who was disabled, which is like almost basically being
Uh-uh.
like the I have a black friend, I could say the N-word.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. Mm-mm. Don't
No.
don't do a half apology. Like,
Yeah.
oh, oh
But
my,
like that's the thing where it
oh,
was like if he had said, if he said the N-word, like no, he's fired, done. This guy was on the show the next day, no issue, no anything. And it's just tough because I feel like there's just it's tough. Like I'm not gonna compare what word is worse than other. I think they're all bad and they're
mhm.
all terrible and they all shouldn't be used.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
feel like there should be a standard that you don't say these types of terms
Mhm.
because especially in a media standpoint where you're talking to millions of people, you should know what words are acceptable and not acceptable to use.
Yeah, you should have like awareness and understanding as an adult of what words you cannot say in your vocabulary. Like, yes, we know the word is there, right?
Yeah.
But I will never use it. Like, whenever we've said the R word here, it just makes my skin crawl. And so that's like definitely one reason why I don't do it because I feel so uncomfortable doing it. But at the same time, I know how much a word matters. And I feel like that's another thing that we forget in our society a lot, especially with social media growing. Social media has a lot of pluses. Like, I'm not trying to bash social media at all. Um, but one of the downside is we hide like in these screens and people think, oh, I'll add all these comments like this and this. And they don't understand that their words matter, that
Yeah.
those words that they're putting is affecting that other person's day. It's affecting how they view themselves because of the weight of words. So I feel like a lot of people need to realize like what is appropriate for their vocabulary and what's not appropriate, and also understand the value of each word that you use because the English language is very powerful. And if you're not being aware, and like you're saying with this person, I'm just saying it on live TV, and then the other person was like, that's not the word I would use, but yeah, I think I would have like stopped. I'll be like, can we like break or something? I'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, can we get a water break? And they'll be like, and then like get the camera stop rolling and be like, do you know you just said that? And then
Yeah.
be like, let's not do that again. Like, let's not.
Yeah. No, it was really uncomfortable. And I think it's one of those things where especially it's a lot easier to say these types of things when you're behind a screen. Like I doubt anyone would come up to us just normally when they don't have the protection behind a computer and
Yeah.
say a derogatory term to either of us or to any disabled person. But because they just
Yeah.
are typing away and they have like a no profile picture or anything, they feel
Hmm.
like they have invincibility and no repercussions for any of their actions. And
Hmm.
it's tough because when it shouldn't be that because you can get away with something, you should do it. You should just not do
Hmm.
it because it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah. And with that being said about like us talking about like this word and overall like everything we've talked about in this podcast, what would you say are like positive like movements forward? Like one thing I can think of is knowing the power of your words and knowing like what to use and like what not to use and having that like self-awareness. But what else would you say um is a positive step like for if someone's like listening to this and they're like, huh, like okay, this is interesting. Like where can we go from here?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest things that we can do are we need to continue educating ourselves. We need to continue uplifting disability voices. We need to continue giving
Yes.
disabled people a platform for change, whether that is in media, whether that is in advocacy, whether that is in charity work, anything like that. We need to
Hmm.
continue giving voices to disabled people and
Hmm.
continuing to educate everyone. Um, I think one of the things that has been really wonderful for a lot of different communities like the LGBT or um, just any community in general, just being able to continuously educate and help promote that positivity and why certain terminologies harmful or why these
Mhm.
certain beliefs are not true. And it's tough because we shouldn't have to be in the position where we have to educate everyone. That's not the burden that we should carry. But in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, if it's tough because like if we're gonna wait for a hero to do it, it's never gonna happen. We need to be the one to get it done.
Yeah, 100%.
We It's not like the movies where there's gonna be some able-bodied savior to save us all.
Oh,
So
I
we
was literally about to say that. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser is not gonna save us like in Extraordinary Measures. As fun as that would be to have Brendan Fraser save us, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah. Definitely education, self-awareness, values of words, and then overall just having voices on platforms to showcase like we are capable, we do matter, and words do affect us.
Yeah. And I think that's just the biggest lesson that you can get out of this podcast, both part one and two, is that it's never too late to change your perspective. There's
Hmm.
always time to educate yourself. And that your words and your actions matter, and that you can create tremendous good in this world, but also on the other end, you have the power to create a lot of harm to people. And how you think and the things that you say or the things that you do are really going to impact everyone around you. Um, so knowing that, try to be the best person you can be, and that it's okay to make mistakes because all of us make mistakes. No one's perfect.
Yeah. And just learn from those mistakes when those mistakes happen and realize that we're human and stuff like this does happen, but it's okay. Like you can pick yourself up and move forward. Just don't stay consistent. Like you were saying, have that awareness and growth like with moving forward and being open to education for sure.
Yeah. And I think with that, that gives us a really good wrap for this episode and the
Yes.
entire two-part podcast.
Yes.
So,
Do you want to tell them about the next episode that we're having soon?
yes, so Montana and I are meeting in person during Rare Disease Week, and we are going to film an episode in person, talking about disability and advocacy and both the importance of it as well as our experience at Rare Disease Week.
Mhm.
Who knows? You may even see our faces. We're gonna film it in our hotel room, one of the
Yeah.
nights, and we're so excited. If you're going to Rare Disease Week, please comment below. We would love to meet you. Whether it's
Yes.
at one of the events or maybe for like dinner or something. We want to be able to meet as many advocates as we can. It's such a wonderful event, and so many incredible people. So we're both gonna be traveling there. At Today is February 22nd.
Mhm.
We're gonna be traveling up the 25th, and we're staying till the 27th.
7th? Yeah, Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm trying to keep track of
I
dates.
had to think about it. But yeah, we would love to meet any and all of you during that time. So if you're heading there, feel free to comment below or DM us
Mhm.
on Instagram. And yeah, with that, we want to thank you for listening to both parts.
Thank
Please
you.
don't forget to subscribe, like, comment below. Follow Disability Written, follow Montana on Instagram, all of that fun stuff. Um, and yeah, with that, I hope you have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.